Welcome, everyone. Welcome to From the Roots to the Frontline, which is curated and hosted tonight by Zena Edwards. It's an iteration of Culture Declares Emergencies, shared virtual table of ideas and possibilities, the offer. And I'm just going to put Culture Declares Emergencies website address into the chat as well. So my name is Claire MacDonald and she, her, hers. And it's my pleasure and privilege to open this event tonight. And I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping before I hand the virtual mic over to Zena. First of all, please use the chat and please feel free to put your name, your greeting, your social media, if you wish, in there, but there's no need at all. And this event is also going to be recorded. So if you don't want to be seen, then switch your camera off. If you don't want to be heard speaking, then please feel free to use the chat instead. Please feel free to direct message me if you need any help. And if you do put things in the chat, and at some point we'll also alert you and encourage you to do that during conversations that are going to go on, then we'll also make sure that any questions or comments you have are read and seen and acknowledged and come into the conversation as well. There'll be opportunities to do that. I'd also like to suggest you mute when you're just listening. I'm going to be posting the social medias, the details of everyone who's offered those tonight as the contributors appear. So I'm not going to do it all at once. We'll just do it as people come up. And you can also copy them, as you probably know, but just to let you know that in the chat, you can also go to the right, you can click on the three dots, you can copy just that post if you want, or you can copy the whole chat by doing that at the bottom, and you can direct message me if you've got any problems as well. So that's a little bit of housekeeping. Now on to what is Culture Declares Emergency and what is the offer for those people who don't yet know. So, truth-telling, action-taking, justice-seeking. Culture declares the climate and ecological emergency is a movement and not an organisation. It's a response to the emerging critical times in which we live and in which what we face, and what's emerging in them through solidarity, resistance, and through the power of culture to make change. It's a ground-up movement, about 2 and a bit years old, and it's in the process of gathering, campaigning, and finding the way into the future through faith, hope, and cultural humility, hoping for a future that sustains the planet and everyone everywhere. Culture Declares Emergency works in solidarity with people and movements across the world who are declaring the emergency to raise collective visibility and increase the urgency of the message. So tonight's event is part of Culture Declares Emergency, and it's an iteration of the offer, which is a Zoom-based event, bringing voices to the table that began in April 2020 in response to coronavirus. It's a space for everyone who has a stake in the way in which culture has the power to address and make change in the climate crisis and ecological emergency, to gather, to share, and to support each other. So deep breath in and welcome. And tonight we have, in order of appearance, Zena Edwards, Serayna Solanki, Abdul Shyllon, AHHAAHHA, Adriene Jenik, Ffion Campbell-Davies, film, and Solomon-Kawall. And their collective credentials, their skills, their histories, and their cultural commitments include beekeeping, earthkeeping, the care of growing spaces, dance, writing, choreography, film production, and the care of humans at the end of life. And in this collective of voices and presences, Zena Edwards brings together faith in the possible and expands what is possible at the same time. Zena will introduce everybody as they come up, and I'll post their social media. And it really is now my privilege to introduce Zena Edwards. And I'll put Zena's socials in the chat right now. And that just kind of shows you what I'm going to do as we go along. Yeah, there they are. They've appeared. So Zena. Zena is a leading advocate for diversity in the Culture Declares Emergency movement. She's founder and creative director of Verse in Dialogue and Create to Transform Dialogue Spaces. She's a passionate advocate for environmental issues, decolonisation, race and power, and she's been mentoring young and emerging artists in professional artist development and creative campaigning since 2010. In fact, she's been working in this field for 27 years, since graduating from Middlesex, and she's a writer, performer, facilitator, and a creative project developer. As a multidisciplinary collaborator herself, Zena has supported the late, great Hugh Masekela, Baba Mal, worked as a consultant with acclaimed choreographer and dancer Akram Khan. She's collaborated with the visual artist Theaster Gates and the radical filmmaker Fahim Alam, and with the Last Poets. And it is my great pleasure to hand over to you, Zena, this evening.
Thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciate that and introduction to the whole event. You've really set the tone, and that's much appreciated. The agenda for today is to hear from each of the artists present, these activists who I have been blessed to connect with on my life journey, who are nourishment to my soul purpose, these human beings who add value to the world, but who have, for many reasons, had to fly below the mainstream radar to protect themselves, and who courageously step into the mainstream as frontliners, as leading roles in the cast, in the theatrics of their politicized bodies, histories, and cultures. They should be on the main stage of the climate environmental justice movement, downstage center in the spotlight when it's appropriate, and it's never inappropriate. They sing from the song sheet of the marginalized, the songs of our ancestors, our migrant settler forebears, who themselves were powerhouses of human resilience, a resilience as defined by the capacity to withstand the legacy of the colonized, but who shouldn't have to. Each of us will make an offering, an invitation to engage with us via the chat of this virtual space creation platform called Zoom. And as our voices and moving images charge down the fiber optics across air, space, and time, we are mindful that our contributions move at the speed of history's making, of building trust, of healing, and of education about other means of existence. So please feel free to write in the chat at any time questions, statements that you have held close to your chest for fear of reprise. Do this as the session unfolds, as your knowing reveals your unknowing of the underbelly of a movement that fights for the planet, but not for all its human inhabitants equally. We invite you to engage in the real world that holds a majority of politicized and policed people of color, where the right to life is affirmed by all tones and textures of our existence. So whether this evening we are heard or felt in the spirit of evolution is up to you. Whether we are heard to be consumed and then discarded as part of an unconscious, internalized, extractivist modus operandi, whether we are seen in our fullest personal and creative power is up to you. We can only endeavor to not be ignored for the sake of us all who trod the crust of this earth. However, regardless, we will continue forward in strength as accomplices against illegal and criminal activities of a Western, Eurocentric, patriarchal, and multifacetedly violent system that strives to erase us from this glorious blue planet and the history of its divine existence. I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human and I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. I am here, I exist. I shake my fist with these words from my lips. My mind is set and my body is strong. I sing of a rebirth, no victim song. No, 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 no. 'cause I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. The system is blind, it binds my feet to silence this skin, no freedom of speech. I work all day so I can find peace. States of violence are at a peak. Na 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 na. 'Cause nature is life. This earth has got rights. Will fight for her freedom all of my life. The road is long, but the struggle is strong. No justice, no peace, our victory song. Na 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 na. Said I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. I said I am an endangered species, but I sing no victim song. I am human, I am an artist, and I know where my voice belongs. Yes, I know where my heart belongs, and I know where my soul belongs, and I know where my body belongs, 'cause I know where I belong. I sing this to give context of the sensitivities that exist within. When I go into activist spaces with inclusion on the agenda, that there is a human spirit packaged in a melanated skin. I'm a Black working class woman who happens to be very passionate about words, about communicating stories, connecting to people, connecting people, who thinks that the species can do some shocking things, and that is okay, and it is not okay. I do not believe we are born bad or selfish or guilty or full of sin. I believe we are all learning to grow into all of our skins. We are young compared to sharks who have existed for 30 million years and crocodiles for 80 millions. We are mere toddlers. I'm a Black working class woman from Tottenham who has an overwhelming love for this rock floating in black space between Venus and Mars, the goddess of love and the god of war. A sentient orb, forever and voraciously abundant, feeding us, putting clothes on our back, giving us space to play and speculate what this existence is really for. This living, breathing organism, generously encouraging and guiding us to grow, to develop and learn about who we are, and that our existence is a lesson in its own right without there having to be an outcome, a product, just the general contentedness of us just being here. Importantly, there are flashes of color, clashes of excitement and blooms of thunder, caresses of spring winds. How our well-being and mental health, our happiness is connected to our relationship to everything, to the wider environment, what we see around us in terms of the structures that we build and the spaces that we leave for breath that is clean, not tainted by the toxicity of a greedy grab of cubic airspace bought by billionaires and corporate moguls who want views of London for their luxury apartments on expensive roads, while those without homes die as collateral on the same streets where we lay so many bouquets, they pave the roads as meadows of shrines. As the disenfranchised youth living on the same margins of scripts that I grew up in, written by parliamentary whips handling MP businesses, sliding fat envelopes across tables with special handshakes and winks. When a man was lynched for the world to see, the mainstream media got noisy as fuck and demanded attention be paid to racism's existence with the highest intensity levels as the same as its rejection of British racism the day before. We've never had this much attention since the civil rights movement, but that was in America. I have received so much attention as a Black woman. Are you sure you're talking to me? I'm only human, and I give thanks that I'm able to be here to have this space to feel when my ancestors didn't. They were not afforded that kind of humanity. I have to say all of this. I have to say all of this in the context of the sensitivities that exist within going into activist spaces with inclusion on the agenda, that there is a human spirit feeling so much packaged in a melanated skin. The nuance of change is going to be profound, but you cannot change the world and not expect to change yourself. Personal revolution equals collective transformation. So I have to say all of this to give context to the sensitivities that exist within going into activist spaces with inclusion on the agenda, that there is a human feeling spirit, feeling so much packaged in a melanated skin. So I wanted to read that piece as an extract from a keynote speech that I did for Seasons for Change last year. And I wanted to sing the song Endangered Species because that was the song that actually introduced me to Culture Declares. And I'm very grateful to have been invited. And I didn't know that it was going to be creating such a huge impact on my life, to be here, to be able to make this piece, bring all of these beautiful people who I know and love together. And I'm going to not talk too much because I'm guilty of doing that. I'm going to introduce Serayna Solanki. Serayna, I'd like for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and why did you agree to come along today?
Well, first I want to say, I didn't know you could sing.
Okay.
Like, you just blow me away. I just can't believe it. Like, every time I meet you, Zena, there's always something that you just surprise me. You always bring a large piece of life. And I think that's why I said yes, because you asked me. And just from some magic that we birthed earlier this year, I want to say, from collaborating together. And we, just for context for the audience, like Zena and I, we got together, invited by Culture Declares Emergency, to create a workshop called Being, Seeing, Knowing. And the name emerged just from the practice we were experiencing. And it was a practice that really gave us time to not make the most of it, but to give ourselves slowness to really delve into the cracks and just what we really meant, and to really create I want to say like a collective meaning. But it wasn't just collective, it was like us fusing together in some way and remembering what that fusion process was. It was really beautiful. So that's why I said yes, Zena. And for me, I want to say I'm not an artist by practice, but I want to say the practice of my art is explorational. I always try everything. I write, I paint. I'm here to explore the world. I'm here for chaos and I'm here for surprise. And recently, throughout lockdown, for me, I've been picking up beekeeping. And that has been a practice for me that has been, I don't know, just to learn. I call myself like an apprentice to the bees. I'm not a beekeeping apprentice. I'm learning from the bees themselves. And what I find so beautiful about bees is just the process that they have around. They're not productive. People have a perception of them being productive, but I call them rhythmically responsive. They're always sensing, and that's through their waggle dances, their buzzes. They pick up on sound vibrations and they communicate. Like, they do this amazing thing where they waggle to each other and they shake their butts and they tell the other bees, all the bees in the hive, because they pick up on these sound waves and these vibrations, where to go. And that's how they share knowledge, by moving. And they also do another thing, that when they're producing honey, they tend to scoop up the nectar into their mouth and actually regurgitate into each other's mouths and then place it back into a honeycomb. And in some processes, it can be, 3 bees. In some processes, it can be like 20 bees. And it's that moment when the final bee decides, okay, actually the honey is ready. The honey is ready and we're going to store this for winter. There's also another thing about bees, is that when you look into a hive, it's never the same. You could look and you could see lots of eggs. You could look and you could see lots of honey. you could look and the bees could have a completely different temperament. And intergenerational exchange as well, older bees teaching younger bees, telling older bees where the food is. They never lose their knowledge, and the knowledge of from 20-30 ago, depending on that hive, still continues within the beehive itself. And so I've been really learning from this practice, and also who I am right now. I want to say, like, for me, I'm a person of many narratives, many faces, many names, many places. And currently right now, I'm discovering what it means to really, really look into my heritage and look at who I am, and trace back my history and my ancestry and my stories. And my community have been doing this really amazing thing right now, where they've been gathering the oral stories of our migration from Gujarat in India to Uganda as indentured labourers and to the UK. And there's also been a huge thing that's been happening, which is the reconciliation of what it means to be a Dalit. And so I wrote this poem, which is called The Knowledge of No Names. And actually I wrote it coincidentally at this time when I was really just trying to understand how bees communicate. And so I don't know where this is going, but as I said, my art practice is very explorational. The knowledge of names are hidden to my tongue. The knowledge of grains are hidden to my plexus. The knowledge of land and plains are hidden to my eye. Is what you tell me to tell myself the truth? When my grandma rings her bell and the first ode to all, she holds me in her heart. Without naming, she knows that I speak with the earth, to her, as her, through her. The knowledge of Dalits was not spoken. It's held in my body as movements and practice. In a world of the spoken and named, to be verbal on tradition is a betrayal to the tongueless practice. When you are of Dalit blood, my flesh shudders at the expansive naming and framing of knowledge, for the violence for when I felt is spoken. Giving voice to the void, is that the right thing to do? Is that the right thing for me? And is the void a form of voice itself? And for me, when I was writing that, I, as I said, I'm just a casual poet, hobby poet, but for me, finding your tongue in all of this, when you have to wear so many faces, is the hardest thing for all. And Zena, a lot of the work I do. I'm sometimes writing like policy, like challenging policy documents of the European Green New Deal, to writing and creating like knowledge programs and knowledge sharing programs. It really requires me to weave these narratives together that is always combining science, justice, my truth, my ancestry, my history, my politics, all of these things. And finding art and being in practice with art is a way that I feel is private for me, to see who I really am and to hold that face high when I need to and when I want to. I also wanted to share that when Zena and I were creating Being, Seeing, Knowing, we were talking a lot about patterns and logics, and that framing of pattern and logics is again very apparent in the way that bees work and come together. Sorry, someone's on. She's come through. Cool. Can you hear some noise coming through?
Yeah, I think if everybody could just ensure that they're on mute, that would be really great. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, I was just going to read another poem from Being, Seeing, Knowing. So this poem was created to announce the workshop and to give guidance to the agenda that we were having. And I'm just going to read it out loud. This is a space that's not to be claimed, where sugar plantations evolve their game. The blind spot of ignorance is sustained. 600 illustrations and 1 billion missing names. Logics and patterns of how power is maintained, institutionalized to the internalized, are deeply ingrained. Being, Seeing, Knowing is in the roots of memory. When we remember, we sense and nurture its energy. And I think I'm going to end there. I feel like each line speaks for itself, and everyone else will delve into those topics further. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Serayna. I would like to just ask you a couple of questions. Yeah. You've been doing, to have yourself in a position of power, because if you think about, you are informing policy, what kind of successes and obstacles have you found when it came to writing that policy, and how is it received from you as a woman of colour?
So, I mean, I've only wrote one report that was written by Equinox. It's called Towards Climate Justice, and it's a critique to the European Green Deal. And for me, I think it was really trying to understand, well, what realm are we working on? Are we working on the realm that can allow for humanhood to come through? Are we working on the realm where we can share the details of our lives? And it was just a real reconciliation for me that the way we make change has to be in combination with art, and that's where we can really see our lives and our stories and create the world in a frame that is relatable to our deeper selves and our deeper selves and our deeper reasons and purpose. And I found that really, really hard actually when writing, because you're wanting to challenge and use the tongue of the colonizer. You're wanting to use the tongue of all these places of institutions and power, and there's even something about the format that doesn't allow for it. And Zena, we always say, you know, we just need to create art. Everyone needs to create art because it always speaks louder than policy documents, but it is necessary, and all worlds can coexist together.
Thank you. Thanks, Serayna. We're going to obviously expand on everything we're talking about in the second half of this event, where there'll be a more in-depth discussion where you'll hear everybody's voices. But at this point, I would like us to continue with the art and call on another good friend, another beautiful voice of Abdul Shyllon. Please do share your offering today. Abdul Shyllon, please.
Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me? Oh, awesome, awesome, awesome. First of all, just wanted to say thank you, Cultural Declares, and Zena, for inviting me to be a contributor to such an important subject matter that definitely resonates with me, has always resonated with me, and is helping me to become more sort of aware and conscious of myself and others. And I'm particularly interested in us decolonizing, really, and becoming, for the world around us to be a safe space for everybody to exist, have self-determination and dignity. So I'm part of that conversation, and I class myself as an artist. I'm an artist that sings and does a little drawing every now and then. But music has kind of been my main thread. Singing and songwriting is something that I passionately love, and it allows me to express myself, to share stories, and again, my contribution, adding value to my time here, paying rent, as it were. So I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, and I'm gonna share a little song that I've written specifically. Hopefully it should sound okay. We've had a few glitches here and there, but hopefully you'll get the essence of what I'm saying and feel it, essentially. Okay, I'm gonna start this up. Just bear with me. Okay, there we are. Can you all hear me through here? I'm just gonna look for awesome, amazing. Okay, let's get this going. Chloride. Said better days, am I gonna see it? Yesterday's ancestors believed it. My blood is strong, carried through the ages. I tell you straight, no chasing this time. I proclaim from this day forward, stating my position as a leader. I wanna stay right where I can see you, choosing the days that are gone. As the days go by, days by, yeah. Look right at the chosen sun. As the days go by, days go by. Alright. Right at the chosen one. I can tell you won't make this look easy, but we can fight your wars, won't you believe me? You can't pretend that you can't see me, 'cause we're moving, taking over this place. I think it's best this way, you won't be tempted. We take control and save you in the process. In the end, it will all make sense. We return to the center of the source. As the days go by, holding on to my look right at the chosen sun. As the days go by, days go by, all right. As the days go by, days go by. Look right at the chosen sun. As the days go by, days go by. Look right at the chosen one. Yeah, 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 yeah. Days go by, all right. Days go by. She-da-da-da. Thank you very much. I really hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again, all. Amazing the things that we're speaking about, and I'm happy that we are able to have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Abdul. That was gorgeous. Always love to hear your voice. I love the lyrics and everything, really impactful and on message. And I really appreciate that you took the time to write that you took the time to write. Thank you so much. Okay, so now I'd like to introduce somebody who I met actually on a project that I was working on, a youth project, and I absolutely, so what's very interesting is when you actually meet people and you meet minds, and your age group has got nothing to do with it. So this is we have a real genuine, authentic, intergenerational, as well as culturally different relationship, and I really respect this person, and I would like to introduce AHHAAHHA to take the stage, please.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna read something I wrote, which is an extract from a piece I wrote in Airy season 2019 after based on a conference that I was a part of. And yeah, I'll just let the words kind of speak for themselves. It's quite heavy, but kind of, and it's, when I was trying to write it, I get a lot of writer's block, and then the song We Need a Resolution by Aaliyah came on, and that's what kind of spurred this, like what became like a 40-minute free write, and it's been unedited. I haven't edited it really, so I'm just going to read an extract from it and I'll let it speak for itself. I'm speaking, and as I speak, I resist that internal desire to speak academically. speak in a way that what I have to say will be seen as more valid by those I am normally in company with in spaces like this, conferences, summits, workshops. I worry about the overly personalized subjective tone of the piece, worry about having my contribution diminished because of its subjective anecdotal nature, that it will be seen as less valid knowledge. I worry about this despite knowing that no one has the knowledge I do because no one has lived a life that I have lived, self-evident. But moreover, that my knowledge comes from my lived experience living in social housing in an area experiencing extreme gentrification, my experience working with young people in multiple areas of London, going through these shifts and ethnic cleansings, that this knowledge is valid knowledge. I know there is a disdain within academia for the overly subjective account, especially when it comes from people of color, women, minoritized folk in general. I also understand how the heightened focus on the I among minoritized writers presents issues also. I know this isn't seen as real knowledge. It confuses me because there's still an impulse in me that thinks that if I back this up with references and citations, I will be more credible, as if the work of PhD students and academics, especially when it comes to working class communities of color, has more validity than my voice, just because it's evidenced or peer reviewed or whatever. When I know most middle class people actually have no idea how to talk to working class people. What's even real? In the context of what's even real, why am I doubting my realness still and elevating academia to realness? The levels, the bullshit, imposter syndrome down to the bone. Speak your heart, don't bite your tongue, don't get it twisted, don't twist your tongue, don't bite your tongue, don't bite your heart to mold yourself around these people who speak so confidently on behalf of you but have no idea who you are. Don't do it. Be real, be real, be real. Am I supposed to change or are you supposed to change? Who should be hurt? Who should be blamed? Who are the actual criminals? Who is a danger? Will we remain? I know it already being made to disappear in so many ways. Will we remain? I don't know, I don't know. Sajid Javid cuts funding for knife crime program. We have so much confusion. When you give a talk about these kind of themes, working with young people, encouraging creativity among young people, working class, black, brown youth, you always look to the news to see if there's a relevant news story. There always is. This time I mentioned a story that appeared on Resident Advisor. YouTube removes over 30 UK drill rap videos that police say incite violence. When creative expression and criminality becomes blurred, is it safe to speak? The Met Police claim these videos incite violence and therefore should be censored. I don't see the white man heart free speech brigade now. You think of the youth you work with, the ones who make music videos on their estates, who write raps and poems and choreograph, who speak about the experiences of their ends or just having fun, how important this is to them, how accessible this form of creativity is for them, and then how this, like everything else related to black and brown youth, especially young men, just becomes criminalized. Every day, every day. You think of what it means to have had a childhood in the ends and a teenagehood in white elite society, how you have never seen more criminality than in the basements of Oxbridge rented accommodation, how middle upper class white boys can literally be found guilty of dealing drugs, sometimes sent to prison, then get to return to finish their degrees and continue their white middle class trajectory. Every day, every day. How middle upper class white boys can literally write dramatic fictionalized public accounts of their illegal drug dealing and recount how they got away with it because they are middle upper class white boys, and again still get to go back to Oxbridge and finish their degrees. It's not fucking fair that people in my area die for the same things that just allow these white boys to live and thrive. Which bodies get criminalized and punished, which don't. Not the game, but the undesirable players, the exploitable players. Straight up, never seen as many drugs in my life as I did in Oxford. White powders up white nostrils that become white lawyers and white bankers and white politicians and white filmmakers and white artists and white academics and white facilitators and white charity sectors. Brown boys falling off balconies. Neighbors ask if it was ganja or fagol, weed or crazy. Both? More? You go to a performance at a gallery in Bethnal Green featuring queer, trans, black people and people of color speaking out about the violence they face as a result of how they, brackets, choose to, close brackets, express themselves. The clothes that I maybe incorrectly see as adornment rather than reality because I don't have the space to understand where I'm at yet, and this constricts my vision. The mental struggle of understanding, the struggle of being yourself when yourself gets violence just for being itself, the pain you feel too deeply on the inside, internally. On the way home, I noticed a bunch of police officers talking to black boys off Globe Road. I don't want to be the one to intervene, but everyone else is just walking past. People always walk past. Too many times in recent memories of intervening before police violence, CBA to engage with them. They claim they are doing important work in ridding the area of knives and drugs during stop and search on the basis of intelligence. People of color are always adorned with something that will invite violence, regardless of how many layers you take off or how conforming your clothes is. The endless violence of the skin you are in externally. I stick around till they're gone, try asking the boys if they're cool. They almost shrug it off. Every day, every day. You go to an interfaith meeting where a representative from the Met Police is talking about hate crimes in your gentrified ends. How the group the Met is specifically and especially focusing on ATM is the LGBT community. There's been an increase in hate crimes against this group. The number of religious hate crimes and racist hate crimes, brackets, these two things are treated as separate categories. You wonder how, close brackets, were far, far higher, especially since Brexit. You remember the Peter Tatchell walk in your ends. You ask the youth at the community center in East to rate their area in terms of safety. They all give it 9 or 10 out of 10. You inquire further and they explain all the things they're scared of. Real shit, but this is just their normal, their life. They see it as nothing extraordinary. You apply to become a teaching assistant in Germany. It's a lottery deciding which area you get assigned to. You end up in Dresden, home of Pegida and the birthplace of organized neo-Nazi Islamophobic sentiment. You are 100% certain no other Muslim people apply for this program. You express your fears about being sent at a place like that to the white German woman who organizes this, and why specifically you, with your visible brownness and therefore assumed Muslimness, got put into that locality. Your disquiet gets routinely erased, and your combined identities invite the laughter of disbelief of, are you kidding me? You're all of that? She claims they can do nothing for you until at some point you reiterate your minoritized gender. At which point a flurry of expression and possibility. Oh yes, of course, maybe we can do something for you now because it fits into our diversity objectives. So Muslim and brown is apparently not diversity, but T is. How some parts of you are seemingly so accommodated whilst other parts of you are thrown out of the house. Life and death eating each other inside you. Is that life? WTF is home. Where do you go? Summer 2017 and hijabi family afraid to go outside. Acid attacks. Stuck in their domestic space. Where do you go? You're walking home on a Friday evening down Bethnal Green Road. You see rainbow flags outside what seems like pretty much every single establishment. You hear loud club music emanating from random establishments along the way. Kebaberies come discotheque. You are bombarded with signs of who is being welcomed in your area and also who is disappearing. Where do you go? Where are you meant to go? You don't know. Make home, make place in the schism between, eroding shoreline. Where do the working class cutie pop go? The ones in between. Something weird about the levels of danger and unsafety and violence that these shifts you see signify when things are getting cosmetic, when people like the new shops, when you know what it means underneath, but you don't know what it means. How you see your community under so much attack that you cut your own throat out to try speak for them, with them, protect them. What's going on? No space anywhere free from violence. You keep wondering, how can art and academia actually serve these spaces? What can it do for these spaces, with these spaces? Is it part of the merry-go-round? Mind melts. This is the context we exist in, that artists and academics and facilitators and charity sectors operate in. This is the levels of endless violence young working class kids exist in. This doesn't even come close to explaining all the levels. This is what you need to understand if you're going to work with them, i.e. not save them. And I'm aware of time, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
I.e. not save them. Yes, thank you. AHHAAHHA. I appreciate the fact that you are so raw and you speak frankly, and I think also sharing your experience of academia as well is important for people in the climate environmental justice movement to know and understand. So thank you so much. Very powerful. Yeah, we're getting some great comments. Please, this is also an opportunity for me to actually say, please feel free to have some questions ready. I'm about to invite our next guest on, but if you have any questions ready for anything that you've heard, whether it's to do with Culture Declares, my contributions, Serayna's, Abdul being an artist who's having taken an activist voice, or AHHAAHHA, please feel free to put your questions in the chat and and we'll answer them after our next artist. So I met this incredible person because I'm obsessed with tarot decks. I'm a tarot reader also, and I have a massive collection of tarot decks. And I actually typed in climate change and tarot, and lo and behold, the eco tarot came up. And since then, I have made a beeline. Bees, did you see what I did there, Serayna? Beeline to make friends with this person. I would like to introduce Adriene Jenik. Please step up.
Thank you so much, Zena, and thank you everyone else. I'm really moved and honored and just really humbled to be here today and be able to make an offering, add something to this get together. I'm just touched. I'm going to share my screen. I'm a visual artist, among other things, and so I have some visuals to show. Hopefully it won't interrupt the beautiful flow and rhythm that we have going here. So just to locate myself really quickly, here's a bunch of different ways that depending on the day that I locate myself. I just feel like that's important. I also want to acknowledge that I am on the land of the historic land of the Cahuilla, Chemehueve, Shoshone, and Mojave peoples. Many people do live here. They've stewarded the land and continue to love it and teach us about it. And I'm really so blessed to be on this land. I connected with Zena around the Eco Tarot, which is the practice I'm primarily going to talk about today. But I also have a practice as a death doula, as an end-of-life doula. And I also am an academic teacher, but I also think of myself definitely as a student. And actually, it was part of the call to me has been to really bring my full selves into the spaces that I'm at. I had a epiphany a number of years ago as I was sitting in a room where there were other kind of people with relative power sitting there, and everyone was, talking policy, this and that, showing their PowerPoints, et cetera. And I had this revelation that I was only showing up even as part of myself. I was showing up as this, intellectual or supposed intellectual, but all the other ways that I know, all the other ways that I present, all the other ways that I don't know were not present at the table. And I really started at that point to really get like, oh shit, if we're not showing up as our full selves, we're really not going to get anywhere. And so I started to challenge myself to just be more courageous, to step outside, totally outside of my comfort zone of what might seem appropriate for that space, and to make other kinds of offerings from things I don't know. And again, from things that I know in other ways. This is all made possible, everything that I think about and do, because I have a deep connection, deep heart connection with the land. And I actually am here in the desert. This is my little compound. It is old, like homestead. There's earth architecture on it, a labyrinth, but it's mostly just a little ramshackle compound with a bunch of animals. I sleep outside most nights. It's been something that over the years has been very humbling to live in the land. I've learned patience. I've learned the cycles of life and death. I've learned perspective. I learned how to get quiet and shut up and just listen, which has been incredibly valuable. And so the land, I owe really so much to the land and the peoples that have stewarded the land and learned how to live on the land. And that, again, it's been very humbling, and I've gotten a lot of perspective and been able to really listen and understand what I'm called to do as well, which has been really important because it's not usually what I want to do. And just to say the shift from being a university professor to a tarot card reader has been a really funny one. Actually, my mother was a professional psychic. She's no longer with us. She's actually sitting here right over in the corner. So I do come from a lineage, but when she was alive and when she was doing her work, I actually mercilessly made fun of her. I was very identified in a different direction. I did computer and media art for most of my working life. And when I felt called, when this project came into being, I really was like, oh, shit, I don't want to do that. That's going to be depressing. Telling people's climate futures, what's that about? That is going to be horrible. And also, I certainly did not feel prepared. But what I've come to understand from my own art practice over the years is when I feel a certain tug to go in a certain direction, that's going to be a journey that's going to take me on some place that I need to know about and need to be in. And I've come to trust that over the years. And so I just followed that. I ended up, this is a public practice. I set up pretty much anywhere, usually just, very heavily trafficked pedestrian thoroughfares. And yes, it has changed during the pandemic. I did move it on the practice online. But going into public space, offering this service, and people just sit down, and actually everywhere that I've gone, lines form, and with people interested in knowing about their climate future. The Eco Tarot is different from a regular tarot reading in that it's not telling you about your love life or your fame and fortune. What I do is I tell people something about their future as it relates to the changes in the environment. And so a big part of what I'm doing is connecting the micro people's own worlds with this macro world and understanding them both as being in a flux of change and shaping one another, and really understanding those forces, working together. And what I've come to understand in the process is that that process of reading tarots, it's a very beautiful, intimate process. And people tell me unbelievable amounts of things about what's going on for them and the ecological grief that they're holding, the other kinds of complex emotions that are at play. And I've come to understand that, and because I work with climate scientists at the university that I teach at, who are, spitting out more and more and more data, but being like, why isn't anything changing? I have definitely come to understand that this is a cultural issue that we're dealing with, and that artists really need to be, taking a lead, or, just being involved, because we understand cultural change. We understand how to make it. And so what I've come to understand in part is that there's this tremendous societal will to make change in people's own lives. It's really beautiful, the amount of change that people are making an effort to make, but that partly people's emotions are actually getting in the way in some ways. And also, I'll speak more a little bit later. I just wanted to show you the card Zena asked us. She said, the practice forward, let's speak from within our practice. And the practice of the Eco Tarot does work in part through this aspect of beauty, through tactility. The cards that I've made, they all are on handmade paper that I made from agave and recycled cotton and linen. And it took me 2 years to make the cards. These are all natural pigments that were ground up and mixed with gum arabic. These are some of the major arcana. You can see, if you know anything about the tarot, some of the cards, like the Lovers, are similar to the standard tarot, and others have been shifted to reflect our kind of climate drama. So that Profiteer over there in the corner is the Devil card. Justice is a card that shows up in both decks. Extinction is death. The Superstorm is the Tower. The Sun is the Sun. It's the same. I've simplified the cards. So many times if you see tarot, there's multiple symbols. I actually have really simplified the cards, and especially the minor arcana cards. They all are aligned with different elements. The cups are the water cards. Often we read the cups in relationship to water. The pentacles are the earth cards. The sword cards become the air cards. And these cards you can see when they're reversed, which is a different reading, they become a smokestack. And then the wands cards are the fire cards, the sun cards. And then the court cards are with each of the elements, but they are las poetas, las guerreras, las guías, and las jefas. And that's just a little bit of a nod to the fact that we live in a multicultural, community, society, and just to bring the beauty of language and the world knowledge and understanding that different languages bring into the conversation. And so these are some of the other cards. Just to give you a sense of who sits down with me, it's actually been a really incredible, I didn't know who would sit down. I wasn't really sure, but it's been really all ages, all races, all walks of life. I've had air conditioning repairmen sit down with me. I've had solar grid engineers for all of Australia. I've had biker chicks get off their motorcycles and come over and sit down and get a reading. Farmers, pastors, quite a few young people, and it's always very moving when young people sit down. And usually when I'm out in public, 75% to 80% of the people that sit down have actually never gotten a tarot reading before. So they're called by the practice, by being curious about what it means to get a climate future reading. I have, here's a few more people. In all different contexts. I've done more than 1,000 readings at this point, really all over the world. And the practice has moved online since the pandemic. At first, like many other people, I was not sure whether it needed to move online, whether it should exist that way, whether it really, should just hibernate for a while. But I began to understand that this was actually a practice that was helping people negotiate uncertainty and engage and guide them through uncertainty. I folded in with the IPCC reports, the climate science and the traditional tarot. I folded in layers of around the pandemic, but also around our racial reckoning we've been having. There was actually quite a bit of climate justice language infused throughout the deck already, but I folded that in. And these are just a few of the snapshots. I usually take a picture after each of the readings. And now one thing I just want to mention is that you can see that people are smiling in the readings, which is not, again, what I would necessarily expect, but what's happened in the readings is that there's this really deep engagement. People get to emote. Sometimes people just sit down and start crying immediately because they have so much emotion they're carrying. We have a moment together where we can really acknowledge, not be in denial around some things that are unfolding. And then also the cards and the spreads that I made, they end up really underlining things that people are doing that they're already thinking about, where they can find hope, where there's help to negotiate these things. And it ends up being a really deeply resonant experience for people. And I've been really moved and, just really just shocked actually by the depth of the engagement of what people share with me and what ends up happening in the readings themselves. I'm anxious. I'm thinking about time, but this is my little mesa just to show you. And I also just want to mention and say something else about the end of life doula work I do. As I mentioned, what I'm trying to do is integrate all this work. So I've had situations where I only had introduced myself as an artist or just as a teacher, or other conversations in which I'm a death doula, but I don't talk about those other spaces, or that I live in the desert. And what I've tried to do now is really integrate them. And I'm finding that, as I'm working with grief, with the work that I do as an end of life doula, and the ecological grief, and all of these things, embracing death, understanding death, befriending death, seeing it as part of life, as what makes life possible, becoming comfortable with loss, because that's certainly part of the transition that we're making, but also understanding the way that community and sacred spaces and some of what we've just heard, that uplifting elevation that art and ritual can provide, can get us through so many aspects of whatever this transition has in store for us. And so I think that's a good place for me to stop now. Again, I'm really humbled to be asked to share with you all, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrienne, so much. And it was great to see your home. Like, because you say I live in the desert and I just have all these other images, but to actually see your homestead and the fact that you sleep outside like most nights is like, that's an incredible existence. So at this point, if we could just come off of, go to gallery view, there we go, okay. At this point, I don't know whether or not anybody in our audience, our virtual audience, has any questions or any comments they would like to make. You can make them, like come onto camera and make them, or have the audio and ask a question, or you can type something in the chat. Just to get some clarity on anything that you found interesting. Please feel free to step in at this point. Got a couple of comments here. I love your light touch on the drawings. This is the art aspect of the work that you're doing, Adriene. I love your light touch on the drawings and the way the figures are almost shadows, shared reading. Somebody made quite an interesting comment. David Jones says, voice is a critical part of justice. I think this was around where AHHAAHHA was talking. Voice is a critical part of justice, and I would place the highest authority. No, sorry, this was when Adriene was talking. Place the highest authority to the voice of indigenous peoples, voices of the Bedouin, of forest people, of lands above the Arctic Circle, Zapatistas, and so on. These voices should be equal to that of the science community, and no less the voices here. Exactly. You got a lot of love as well, AHHAAHHA. Thank you for your contribution. As I said, the point. And because it's so London-centric, it's or UK city-centric, then I think it's important that your voice is heard. I do have one question for people to have to consider, and I think just at the end of your presentation, Adriene, I was thinking about the definition of ecological grief and maybe the state of shock or paralysis we might be finding ourselves in when it comes to actually, are we acknowledging that the planet is actually in grief? Most of the population is actually in some stage of grief, some stage of panic, some stage of disillusionment. And how do we move from a position of power rather than stay in a state of paralysis? How do we feel empowered at this point? This is one of the questions. I think it's something to think about. Adriene, I love the idea of deep alternative knowledge and that so many people are seeking that. Do they come to you with worry or uncertainty about the climate future, or is it a personal quest? If you'd like to answer that, Adriene.
Sure. And first of all, I want to say, like, I really do feel that this ecological grief, part of it is that it's white people that are waking up to it. Obviously, our Indigenous brothers and sisters have been experiencing this for so long. So there's a delayed effect. And I feel like that's like also a place to go to learn how to, how to connect with the land, how the land can, really help us, how our ancestors can help us, how those other knowledges can really, help us and assist us in also connecting with each other. And thank you for that question. It's actually, it's not the same, but I don't usually have people ask a question as you normally do in a Tarot where you pose your own question. Instead, my spreads, actually, I have people just try to connect to the earth consciously and bring that out while they're shuffling. And then the spreads actually unfold, and people will share things, their concerns. I mean, young people are having, just a true existential crisis. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have shared that they are not having children, or they really, it's very, very deep what's being carried. And I feel like there's that the extent to which people have community is really clear, that that's something that's enabling people to, move beyond, to transcend, these emotions. In some cases, the emotions are really, they're just crippling, and they're really, a lot of times it's overwhelm. And I'm sure a lot of us have shared that as well. Just, where do I even start? I know I need to do something, but in every direction I turn, there's something to do. And so that's a nice thing about the cards. They actually, do this work of helping to focus, helping to shuffle you, get you outside of your normal grooves and kind of patterns of thought, and help you focus on, bring something forward in your mind that, again, is not necessarily predictive. It's a guidance. It's a place maybe to start to open up something, to open up some other, or underline some thoughts or feelings that you're already having that you need to spend more time attending to. In the end, what people see in the cards themselves and the connections that they make is the most important. So I usually try to guide them into a process where they can make their own connections for what's coming out in the reading.
Fantastic. Thank you. And at this point, I think it makes sense that we take a little bit of a comfort break, maybe go and grab a cup of tea, get some water, move around with our legs, go to the bathroom, do whatever it is that we have to do. So just for 10 minutes, we're just going to take a break. We are running 10 minutes behind, so hopefully we can be able to make that up. I would still like for there to be a very juicy chat. We're still hoping to get the 30 minutes of chat where everybody's together, because I aside from everybody sharing their work, it's about the interplay, our interconnectedness and the dialogue that we have, that you're going to really see the richness of the knowledge of that's out there that we may not be all aware of. Okay, so please feel free to go off camera, take a break, and I will just play a little bit of music to keep us entertained. Thank you.
Everyone forgets. Old spirits come back good and bad. Down, war they fall down. They fight again, never again. All trying to get back what's been lost or taken. Beckons a genocidal sleep to rise up and wake up. Brace stand up.
Okay, I think we should start coming back now. If people are in the room, that would be great. But we have 1 minute, maybe just one more minute, and let people come back. So some of the comments that I've made, we've got, thank you, Andy, saying this has filled me, which is beautiful. This is the nourishment that we hope that these conversations can provide. This is what Culture Declares, the offer, and create to transform dialogue spaces are all about. The whole idea of using creativity as a tool for stimulating conversation at levels that we don't normally go to when we are in kind of conversations like this. So we have a lot of people present their work, but then they're asked to talk about their work, but how does the work actually, what is the process behind the work? How does the work actually stimulate deeper conversations? And I'm really glad to have that comment there, because for someone to feel that they have been filled or fed by this work, well, we're doing our job then, aren't we? We're doing our job. What else have we got here? Gal, it's been recorded, so am I. These are rich offerings, and may we find ways to thrive and navigate these times, breaking outside the dystopia and reimagining our futures through art, creating solidarity and transformative justice. Thank you for that, Beverly. All right, so I think I want to wait, and it would be really great if people could just put themselves on camera or to just click on the reactions. So let's see who's actually in the room, because there's this piece of work that I would really like for everybody to see. It's a film that an artist who was recommended to me actually by two good friends, Ffion Campbell-Davies. This, I mean, she's gone beyond what I'd imagined would be done in a very short space of time. She's a very busy artist. Thank you so much for saying hi. Yeah, let me know that you're all there. Just put a reaction up in the corner, a wave, a smile, an emoji of some sort. Thank you so much, brilliant. Yeah, Ffion Campbell-Davies. So put this piece together in a very busy schedule, in a short space of time, and it is, I'm so grateful for the work. We had a very brief conversation, and this is a very rich piece that is called We Belong. So it'd be great, Polly, if you could share your screen, and let's have that piece played.
Just give me one moment.
Okay. Fantastic. Amazing. Amazing piece. Amazing piece of work. Okay, just because I'm really very aware of time, just a big up to Ffion. We'll have a little bit more chat about her piece a little bit later, but because I'm aware of time, I'd like to move straight on to Ian Solomon-Kawall, or KMT. I met Ian, when did I meet? I've just put it like this, I met your work in 2013 before I actually met you. And I was just like, this guy, he's onto something. I would really like to work with him in the future at some point. And then we connected over a youth project again. And now we're here, continuing. So please, Ian, you all said you wanted to do a piece. How are you going to do it for us today? You're going to have to go off mute. You're muted. Okay.
Just breathe. Pain is temporary. You sacrifice your life to give me a vision. I'll drop 15 years to fulfill my mission. Time to have a one-to-one. This is mental health looking deeper within. You sacrifice your life to give me a vision. I'll drop 15 years to complete my mission. Time to have a one-to-one. This is mental health looking deeper within. They labeled you mental with tears in my eyes. I'm so in love, a powerless child. Gave me life, for this I give thanks. From your ashes made project arrived. Rays of light as you wind to the ground. Then bottles of red darkness all around. Rays of light as you wind to the ground. And bottles of red darkness all around. My throat hurts to write this track. 1.5 centuries, I'm still looking back. They took full advantage, they abused you. As a young child, what could I do? From your pain, I learned so much. How to listen, compassion to the max. They called it depression, trying to find a way. A country full of ice, skies filled with grey. Linear thinking medicine too readily gave. False diagnosis, not examining the shade. Read your letters and so it would seem. You were afraid of sex, but you wanted to be free. You being promiscuous, I still don't believe. I know you knew me. 9 months you carried me, so I can't be deceived. 9 months you carried me, so I can't be deceived. Gave her EST, not Frankenstein. She's my mummy. Replaying this horror, my heart always bleeds. I called for help, but no one listens to me. I knew the answers and drugs weren't the need, but as a black teen, I'm not heard or seen. Started depressing, then bipolar. Intoxicated spirits, it just got harder. A country so civilized, I can't care for the weak. I vowed the same won't happen to me. I vowed the same won't happen to me. Open my wounds, vulnerability. Open myself so I can be free. The pain and reality, the truth runs deep. Being a carer so hard to detach. Enmeshment in love, this song plays back. I still cry for help, but no one listens to me. I still cry for help, but no one listens to me.
Thank you, Ian. So at this stage, I'm going to let Ian have a voice in a moment. But at this stage, I want to just comment why I'm really moved by that piece, because I know that you set up, this is where we get into the discussion, by the way, people. This is the discussion part. This is where we want your voices. This is where we want your questions. This is where we want you to be able to reflect and ask all of the artists about their work. And also we're going to go into the bigger conversation about anti-racism, decolonizing the climate justice and environmental justice movement. Now, the reason why I just want to go back to Ian and why that poem is so important is because that poem was, that piece was about your mum, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And it was because of your mother's lived experience as a Black woman in the UK that you continued her legacy of her garden, of her using her garden as a tool for self-care. Would you like to go into a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so basically, my mum, as I said in the song, I said EST, and if anyone knows what EST is electric shock treatment. Okay. So I say EST, she's not Frankenstein, like Frankenstein, a female version of Frankenstein. And what I'm referencing is actually how basically she was used as a guinea pig, you know, for the majority of her life because she was vulnerable. She was a vulnerable person. And so my personal experience is seeing that time and time and again with people the most vulnerable, the people on the most margins of society. If we look historically, people, indigenous people, people from the lands, you know, the whole history is removed from their lands, taken captivity, you know, the resources extracted, and yet we're still experiencing this in 2021, you know, like the oppression. So this is a difficult piece. And actually, I was going to avoid doing it like I've done before when I did the youth program. But, you know, I have to force myself to go through this because this is the racialized trauma that we kind of experience and embody, and the impact of decolonization, all these things. But my thing is, how do we take that? How do we transform that? And actually by using the garden, which I'll get into a bit more, that's what I've been able to do for the last 15 years.
Right.
So, yeah.
And with your work, how have you found yourself like positioned when you're thinking about the environmental and climate justice movement? Because one of the things that me and you talk about, what all of us talk about actually, is about ideas of what a climate justice or environmental justice activist looks like. And it seems like the perception, I mean, they don't look like you. They're not presented as you know, like a rap artist from South London. You're in South London, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I first did this, I mean, there's definitely a shift now in terms of the awareness. But when I first started this 15 years ago, there wasn't so many people, apart from yourself, maybe Mama D, Donna, a couple of other people on the circuit who we consider to be elders now. And, you know, the ability to use my tongue to express what I've gone through, I wouldn't say is my first tool. I don't consider myself to be like, Zena underestimates how great she is. I love when Zena talks about Midpoint Gardens because she does it better than I do, and it's my project. Do you know what I mean? So that's not my thing. My thing is really, how do you get people to experience what it's like to reconnect with nature? So I find it challenging to express myself in these formats because ultimately, if it was in a garden, I'd be flying. Do you know what I mean? If it was a natural environment, I'd be flying. And what it is, I'm really about the experience. I'm really about the solutions. So Poetic Gardens is a council home. I don't own the home. It was the place that my mum basically passed away in, like she died more or less. When I refer to bottles of red darkness all around, the room next door to me was where she had wine bottles. Like from being alcoholic. That was one of the many symptoms she had. I mentioned bipolar. So, you know, to me, to transform that pain into something that is, I would consider beautiful and is actually healing people was the first motivation for me. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't decolonization. It wasn't any of that stuff. That became later. Like when I started a conversation with yourself and other people, I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. But the first thing for me is, how do we heal each other? Like we've been through a process of hurt, like in many different ways through this system. So Poetic Garden was really a space to just provide a safe space for people to reconnect with nature and to be healed. And that's what it's always been. And then it's evolved from Poetic Gardens being a space, safe space workshops. We've just more recently done a natural building. And actually someone said, like, literally they feel like they're building their ancestral home back home, you know, because it was a natural building. As there's a little picture of it, I've got the diagrams here. Then we have a youth program because obviously I'm, you know, I'm like a natural system. I'm decaying, you know, like that's a reality. With age, we do, you know, that's a natural process. Mm-hmm. So it's about, you know, recognizing that, and who do I pass on to? So Hip Hop Garden is an award-winning program. And again, the two things that we really focus on is well-being and economics and employability. Because no matter where you go, no matter how many conversations you have about this movement, unless we've got finances, and which is ultimately power, we can't change the narrative. You know, gentrification, deforestation, all these kind of things that happen constantly at the hands of oppression. But unless we have the finance, that's what I'm really focused on, you know. like actually sharing those resources to ensure that, you know, if I can do this with my home and a council house and inspire thousands, not hundreds, thousands of people around the globe to come and see a vision of what an alternative community can look like. And there's no excuse for people in parliament. There's no excuse for people in power. There's no excuse for people in business. People say, this can't be done. This cannot be an inclusive movement. I don't buy to that no more. And I challenge a lot of those organizations in that way. Like what we have here, we have, I should have put the slides on, but I've gone into it. Sorry about that.
Good.
You know, is an event, you know, that we have, which you're participating in. And it's really beautiful to have you there, because what we're doing, someone's camera's on, or someone's,
yeah,
put themselves on mute because I can hear a lot of background noise.
So I've done it now. It's okay.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So basically, like Can We Grow is an event which is a platform for people from all different spectrums of the environmental climate change, you know, movement. Like we have capoeira. Well, people say, why do you do capoeira? But if you look at how capoeira is, how they think about their movement, their hands are connected to the earth. That's their thing. They invert the world, so they're constantly seeing the world through the eyes of nature. So, you know, you do tarot, for example, there. So the previous woman before, I forgot her name, apologize.
Adriene.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. A bit forgetful, another story, dyslexia. So, you know, we bring all these different connections, the Hamilton in astrology. These are all ancient art forms that our ancestors used to use, who are connected to nature. All these ancient sciences, these are the sciences that we need to use. So it's not just people that want to come to the garden, then Can We Grow serves as that. And then more recently, I've become an artist, because creativity is a very potent, everybody on here is a creative being, and it's a creative, I don't think we know how powerful the tool is, but we're not given the power to make those shifts with our creativity again. So, you know, music is the weapon, for example, music is medicine, all these metaphors. So what runs through all elements of my work is creativity. And because most of that work is all community-based, and, you know, if you work in a community, generally speaking, there's not really much economics involved in it. You know, it's still quite a challenging environment to make a living from. More recently, I've become a consultant, and what I do, I take all that grassroots, 15 years of grassroots knowledge to those businesses and actually challenge them to become more inclusive. So we've just launched a leadership program with Lush to ensure there's a pathway for senior members of Lush management to become more senior in higher positions as well. So that's the kind of work that I do. I try to challenge, you know, I try to make it more inclusive. I try to make more, you know, the environment movement more, basically that more inclusive, basically. So
yeah, I mean, inclusivity is such a tricky word. I think for me, I always think about the term inclusivity. I'm just like, well, just stop doing the stuff that's exclusive, and then we're automatically included.
Yeah,
you know. And I think that's about thinking about how are we excluded, maybe through language, like you said. We talk about access to power. What does power look like, and how willing are people in positions of power to hand some of that over? I think there's some real talk that needs to be had. Like at the beginning of the session, I spoke about personal transformation is personal revolution is collective transformation, or personal transformation is collective revolution. You can it's kind of interchangeable, but you can't change the world without making some changes within yourself. And I just know that there's some people who are in positions of power, who are privileged, who are white, are just not ready to hand over power because they feel like it's a loss of some sort. And I think that's a really tricky. It's a tricky space to navigate, especially if you're kind of like, I don't know what the word is. If you've been bought into or unconsciously, you know, adhering to the narratives of, and I'm just speaking very frankly because that's what this space is supposed to be about. If you're sticking very closely to the narrative of whiteness having privilege or being more prestige than those of color, and I just think that's unconscious bias that has to be looked at, and I don't want to say analyzed, because this isn't about psychoanalysis. This is about global perspectives being shifted. The world is changing. We saw George Floyd, we saw a Black man being lynched on our social media timelines, and suddenly everybody woke up to the world actually being unequal.
Yeah.
Suddenly,
well, it's really interesting. You use that navigating. That's exactly what we do, and it's interesting because you talked about inclusivity. I use the word biodiversity. Like this is, if you talk about environmentalism, all my methodology has come from my observation and immersion in nature. Just like how I forgot her name again. Sorry.
Adriene.
Slept outside. Like that's what we need to do more of. Like we need to reconnect with nature. Nature has all the answers. So this has all come from me. So for example, when you talked about navigating those spaces, those white spaces, I use a thing called steady and slow solutions. Like one of our partnerships or one of our took 8 years to formulate. But when you look at nature, like that's not a period of time. But we're so obsessed with this quantifiable, outcome-driven, like 15 years. That's time. You know, I mean, that's a bit of time. But we're obsessed with the 1, 2, 3 years. Like that's a man-made timeline. When you're dealing with trees that are 5,000 years old, when you're dealing with indigenous people that are 10,000, 6,000, like that's real time. So steady and slow solutions are really important, and because you're dealing with an array of power, an array, unconscious bias, institutions, all these kind of things. And when you're stepping into that, like it takes time. It takes time. So yeah.
I guess because it feels like an emergency right now, it's like whose emergency we're talking about, because people from colonized communities have been experiencing the emergency since the colonizers arrived. Anyways, this is where I would really like to pull in, we have a question from Heather, but I'd also like Serayna to come in, because Serayna actually has a project called My Grandmother's Garden. So again, this is about getting back to roots, getting back to the land, getting back to sovereignty over food also. But Heather, if you have a question, please go ahead.
Well, it was more just a feedback in response about language and about how language shapes perception. And if you actually look up the word nature in the dictionary definition of nature describes it as the phenomena of the physical world collectively, including plants, animals, the landscape, and the features and products of the earth, as opposed to humans or human creations. But we are animal. You know, we are descended. We have our ancestors go back to the apes. You know, we are animals. So our language is already separating us. The grammar is already separating us. I think we have a real problem with, with how, I mean, this is why poetry and poetic language is so powerful. So ecology and climate and ecological emergency is a branch of biology that deals with the relations of organisms to one another and to their physical surrounding, which includes humans and the way we are impacting on more than human species. So actually, I think, there needs to be a challenge. Nature, we have to really open that word up and really look at it. And I think it needs to almost be redictionarized.
If that's a word, but yeah, let's make it one. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Heather. Thank you.
I want to ask Jean a question.
Yeah, please.
Like, how is nature helping you to reclaim who you are and, like, ground yourself in who you are? Because you've just told me that, this isn't this environment where you're your natural self. This isn't the space. So what is it, and how does that feel when you are in your natural space?
I don't feel like, basically, it's funny because I was having a meeting today about racial trauma. And one of the things that you face in society is this sense of scrutiny, this judgment, like when you step in, just like if you're wearing bright clothes, people go, why are you wearing bright clothes? Like there's a constant, as a person of color, you're always judged, you're always navigating spaces, whereas the garden doesn't judge me. Like I can actually, and the crucial thing is, again, is the listening. We're dominated by a society that is and there's space for all, but we're dominated by the written and the spoken word, like with written and spoken word. But actually, the majority of our communication is non-verbal. So when you start to tune into that in terms of nature, you'll see a whole world opening up. And very often, the first thing I say to people when they come to my spaces is like, just walk around in silence for 10, 15 minutes. And they're like, oh, they find it uncomfortable. It's one of the most uncomfortable things they find. They've never been in a space or environment where they've been still. But if you look at a tree, for example, the silent observer, as I call it, full of knowledge, full of wisdom, silent observer, deep roots. And I think Zena and myself talked about this, that how can we help people be more grounded? So that's what that does for me in terms of actually the garden. It helps me to be more grounded in process as well, amongst other things. Thank you, Serayna. Good to see you again.
I mean, at this point, I would like to, you know, Serayna, have you explain a little bit about the project that you're doing now, My Grandmother's Garden?
Yeah, so I've basically, not basically, complexly created a program called Grandmother's Garden, and I can't share so much of it yet, and that's just because it hasn't yet been finished. But I want to share a bit about the process, and whilst I'm in the process, and just reflecting on how I entered my my talk, you know, talking about bees and how they never really finish a process. They're always in process, whatever. Whenever you take out a frame, it's always different, and it's never really finished, is what I want to say, and it never finishes. The questions that we were asking ourselves when it was being created was, you know, what even is Grandmother's Garden? What is it that you take to Grandmother's Garden? What is it that you leave behind? How what does it look like? And all of these conceptual imaginations were a space for people to reclaim. Even the word Grandmother's Garden, what is that word in a tone or a language or a phrase, a rhythm, away from what our tongues have been trained to use? And it kind of opened up this knowing and this need and this desire to reclaim those lost knowledges, those lost sources, those lost ways of existence, those lost ways of beings that just sit so lightly on the tongue. And I don't know why a lot of my metaphor comes back to tongue, and maybe it's just something to do with how we've been asked to use our voices in this past year, and especially in the face of injustice. And I wanted to come back to another narrative and face that I now have to wear as I'm a coordinator of the home campaign, which is called Hands Off Mother Earth, which is against geoengineering, and it's been assisting the Sami community that is currently across the Nordic Arctic region, and they have a campaign, a petition at the moment, as they've been trying to stop experiments that have been happening on their lands to do with manipulating or dimming the sun by shooting sulfide particles into the atmosphere. And it's been a real, you just kind of, for me, it's just a question of like, how does this happen? Why does it happen? And for me, it comes down to how power can be grown and manipulated through to a complete disconnection, a crisis of relationship in nature. And those solutions that are claimed to be solutions are never actually dealing with the problem and the root cause of power and the root cause of like deeper power and deeper purpose. And so I'm actually going to send in a link, because we are here to talk about roots to the front line, and I'm going to say that the Sami community right now are right here on the front lines, having these experiments be enacted without any consultation, without any recognition of their values to do with nature and the land. And it's not only here that this is happening, it's happening in many places of the world. That can be to do with like ocean fertilization, sea scattering, like glass particles across the Arctic. And these are all ways that aren't actually working with nature, that aren't recognizing the power of Mother Nature, and also the complexity that we as humans are still yet to understand because of our relationship that has been lost. And it's a relationship that needs reconciling with. And so, like, thank you, Ian, for all the work you're doing. That brings us back down to the ground and brings us back down to the ecosystem that we are a part of. I'm just going to share a link, and if anybody is in a part of like a civil society group or an individual who feels quite strongly about this, like, do consider signing on, because as we see this crisis grow, the the shape of power evolves and it keeps changing and it comes down harder. And I really ask, you know, if you do about this, you do sign the petition.
Great, thank you. I put up there a website for Hands Off off Mother Earth, but I don't think that's the right one, so please ignore that. This is the one that Serayna's put up is the correct link. We've got a question from Dr. Yewande Okoleye. Would you like to ask a question, please? You can either put it in the chat or turn your camera and mic on, and please feel free to ask a question.
Oh, hello, it's more of a comment. Sorry, I don't have enough bandwidth to
no worries,
put on my
okay.
camera. Just to say thank you so much. This just is so rich, considering 24 hours ago, I didn't even know this was happening. I just want to make a comment in regards to what Ian said. And I think this climate emergency, or this anxiety which we're feeling, I think it requires a real sense of emergency and change in the way that we work. And I think it'd be very good for us, of people of color, Black people, if we focus inward on trying to get this message across to Black communities as quickly as possible. So today, if I hadn't come here, I wouldn't have known about this wonderful work that we do. And I was thinking that one thing about self-care that we really need to do is focus on ourselves first, instead of trying to convince the white communities that they need to change. I think the transformation really has to come within us, and then with us as a community. That is how we can change the shape of power. I loved what Serayna said about, I just wrote that down. And I think it's believing in what we can do might change the shape of power. Because I think of Toni Morrison and what she says about racism being a distraction. I think one of the distractions that we always do is trying to keep on reaffirming or keep on showing people the way. We need to walk the way ourselves first, collectively. And England is a small island. There are people, I'm from Nigeria, there's a whole continent of Black people that could be our audience. I really feel, personally, that's the strategy we need to take. And that's when we'll find the economic backup than trying to appease people that actually once, my research is in medical cannabis, and from what I see, once people get that knowledge, they already have the infrastructure, they would actually take this knowledge and actually commercialize it, and it's gone. So that's just, I hope that is clear, but that's just how I'm formulating it in my mind. So it's more of a comment than a question. Thank you so much.
No problem, thank you. I think you're absolutely right on all fronts. I think we are, people from Black and brown communities are doing more work than we actually know that we are doing. And I think the part of the fracturing of us not knowing about each other is actually part of a colonial narrative. That's why we were speaking much earlier about how the definition of what a climate justice activist looks like isn't in the mainstream looking like us, basically. But if it was, then more of us would be doing the work, or more of us would be more vocal about the work that we do. I think the issue with what, of saying that we should just be focusing on the Black community or the brown community means that there's other work that needs to be done, which is actually speaking to institutions, which is about speaking truth to power. That work has to be done also. But one of the things that I find really, it kind of not unnerves me, but makes me, I don't know, it's like a bit of a tick. It makes me have a tick in some way. I can't explain it in any other way. Is that when we look at whiteness, I'm just going to speak very frankly because that's what this conversation is about. When we look at whiteness, or people who are in positions of power, who are white, who want to make change, who want to be part of the conversation, who want to have the uncomfortable conversations that people keep on telling us and them to have a conversation about, but no one's facilitating the uncomfortable conversation so that we can get beyond and actually have people who want to give us resources to empower us, who want to be part of the change and moving into a world where we actually are more inclusive and there is equity. But people don't know, because they're human, how to get beyond the uncomfortable. And what it actually means is that people have to facilitate the uncomfortable space. And one of the reasons for why this space exists isn't about trying to convince anybody. This is about, we're here to speak our truth. We're here to show that we are actually on the radar, that we're doing incredible work, that we have deep depth of knowledge. This isn't about us sharing our trauma, which I think is also a problematic space. When I go to a lot of spaces that are all about anti-racism, is that it's retelling Black trauma all the time. But actually what we're doing in this space is talking about the constructive and deep work that we're doing that's really impactful in the communities and the people who come into contact with it. But what we needed to do was actually get all of these heads in a space together to actually have a dialogue and actually speak about and share what it is that we do, and to show the depth of our knowledge. And ultimately, you know, we hope this piece of this one offering that we've got, when it goes onto YouTube, that we share it on our own platforms also, people are able to say, you know what, I want to know more about the work that Serayna's doing. I want to know more about the work that Ian's doing. I want to know more about the character AHHAAHHA. You know, I think it's very important that the work that's outward facing, not just internal, happens also, because we are attacked on all of these fronts. So we have to push back on all of these fronts. Please speak up. Yeah.
Yeah, can I
please step in.
Thanks for, I just stewing on some of the things that have been shared, and also appreciative of everyone who shared. And like, it's funny, I was thinking when the people who shared before me were sharing a lot of the themes, it almost made me want to read another piece, because it also, as Ian and Adriene's piece came afterwards, it almost felt like it was an appropriate thing to share, but maybe next time. But one of the things I was thinking about was in relation to what Yewande was saying about like needing to focus on ourselves and thinking about voices. I guess one of the themes that came out from what everyone shared, I think, was like grief. And I remember from the film, one of the things I wrote down was ether, and just like, I guess, things that are invisible. And I think about invisibility a lot, and like what gets invisibilized and what appears, what's allowed to appear, what doesn't get seen, what's made to disappear. And I agree also that it is really important for us to focus on ourselves as part of the process of figuring out how to be in community or care for community or care in a more global sense and in a more kind of universal sense as well. And yeah, I think like speaking and like being able to speak out and actually use your voice is really important. Something I've been doing this year. It's been really interesting since the events of last June 2020, since George Floyd's murder. I've been in like various kind of Zoom spaces, mostly Buddhist spaces actually, which were like specifically for Black people and people of color. And I was often the youngest person in the space, and it was often full of people who were much older, like in their and people who were in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And what was quite just sad was just how many of, sad isn't the right word, but what's quite like, sad was like how many of them had said that this was like the first year in their lives that they've spoken about stuff and about various experiences they've had of the way their racialization has impacted their life, their work, their ability to just be. And that was just quite, and it made me think a lot about that, because I still generally don't feel comfortable or safe enough to speak out to institutions, because I know how you can get cut off and how you can end up like, being materially like effed over basically. And it was so saddening to see like how much you have to like contort yourself in order to exist. And I guess related to that, I was thinking about like the thing about language and like human and nature, and like what I presented, what I shared was just my perspective. Even some of the people I spoke about probably have different perspectives to what I've shared, and I don't see it as a truth. I don't see it as the truth. I see it as a truth. And I think I guess just last was just like the importance of like multiple perspectives. So even for example, like thinking about like, because I do think it's really important to like get back to nature, and like I see spirituality and astrology and tarot as ways in which I connect back to nature and cycles and different ways of understanding time outside of like a white, patriarchal, colonial way of looking at it. But at the same time, I want to like complicate the picture and think about the fact that there are so many people, colonized people, Black and white people, who have never been allowed to be human. And as kind of Zena was sharing, they've never been allowed to be human. And as much as we have to like think about how to reintegrate back into nature and see human beings as part of nature, we also have to see which human beings have been allowed to be human, which ones have not ever been allowed to be human. And yeah, that's it, I think.
Please, Sarah. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's really moving, and especially what you just said, AHHAAHHA, I think it really touches on a question that I have, and it's an uncomfortable one, and I'm going to ask it because I don't know the answer. So I'm working in eco-social art practices with artists predominantly to dissolve the ego and the self so that we can become one with nature and realize ourselves as part of a symbiocene. And I'm wondering, how do we move towards that dissolution of ego and self and identity while also honoring the pain of non-white people and their identity, as long as we see each other as the other and the other side, and that includes institutions versus the individual. And as long as we keep seeing that, how can we heal? But then in trying to ignore, trying to push ahead as though that's not there, is that just ignoring? So that's my question for everybody. Anybody?
Yeah, I'm just trying to be really mindful of me taking up a lot of space. Heather, did you want to say something? I'm also aware that it's 9:04. I think we can probably have to make this the last question, and maybe a couple of comments, closing comments from our contributors, and then we'll have to call it a night. But please, Heather, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
Oh no, no, I'm happy to listen. No immediate comment.
Okay. I would like to respond, Sarah. One of some of the work that I've done, which was directly talking about the uncomfortable spaces that we have to go through. Serayna and I made this project, which we spoke about earlier on, called Being, Seeing, Knowing, which was about how do we just be, how do we see each other, and how do we know that what we see is our authentic selves, is like that kind of all-encompassing truth. And I think one of the things that we have to come to terms with, that we are full of emotions. We are emotional creatures. We are sensory creatures. And I think what was spoken about earlier was that separation that's made. I think it was you, Serayna, who said that there's a separation that's made between ourselves and the earth through language. And I think, and actually, I'd actually like to call Adriene in at this point as well, is the separation that we make between the mind, body, and the spirit, the separation that we make between the mind and our emotions. I think particularly when it comes to, European culture, the English is stiff upper lip, don't show your emotions, toxic masculinity that says, you don't cry, but then what are you not purging when you don't allow yourself to cry? If we can't be in an authentic state of grief, which means going through all of the spectrums of emotion of what that grief means, which will mean fear, which will mean anger, which will mean being terrified, which will mean deep, deep, deep sadness. If we can't allow ourselves to experience that when the earth is out there in process and cycles of dying and being reborn, then how are we supposed to have a connection with ourselves if we don't allow ourselves to have a connection with all of our emotions? And when we go into climate justice movements, or even the work that I've done in activism, and I've had to work with young people, and particularly with young people, it breaks my heart, because I have young white kids who are bursting into tears because they are so guilty and so ashamed of the legacy of their forefathers. And I'm like, God, I just need your mind right now, because your mind is brilliant. It's forward thinking. It wants to see a world where we are actually living in equity, and you've got ideas and strategies of how to get there, or you're a brilliant creative artist. And I can't work with you if you're a blubbering mess of guilt and shame. We can't move forward empowered if we're moving from a space of shame. And that's me respecting the dignity and the integrity of another human being, regardless of their skin color. So I think we have to hold those uncomfortable spaces and allow people to move through these emotions, forge these connections again between the self, the physical body, the emotional body, the spiritual body, the psychological body, forge those connections again. And then we can start speaking to each other on an equal footing. Like, you can start recognizing me beyond my skin color, and vice versa. And then we can start doing the work of healing the earth so that we don't just, basically wipe ourselves off the planet at the end of the day. And it's important that people who are in positions of power also go through this process. So they have to forego their egos. They have to, and recognize that they are fragile because they haven't had a difficult lived experience, which enables them to form some kind of emotional resilience. So when you talk about white fragility and stuff like that, it's just like the fragility is because privilege has protected you. This is the real world. This is the real world. It's predominantly Black and brown. Acknowledge that, and you don't have to live in fear, basically, because of that. But I just very quickly, I would like to ask Adriene to speak about your work, expand a little bit the work that you do as a death doula and how you see that related to climate futures. Thank you for your question, Sarah.
Thank you, Zena. So this issue of loss, of coming to terms with loss, of coming to terms with our body, of coming to terms with our mortality, of coming to understand that we all will be ancestors, and getting close to and understanding our practices that can assist us, in moving together, of learning how to be in community with one another, because death can actually break communities apart, or it can bring them closer together. And families, I'm also talking about there. And how do we just honor that space, make space for that, and understand it as part of a cycle? And so that's, really where I see it. It's also really humbling work. And that's just the other thing I just want to say, and the beauty of what Serayna and Ian and AHHAAHHA and the Abdul, everyone's brought to this panel is this understanding of ourselves as part of a larger whole, as not the person with the solution or something, but as part of I feel like I'm just I'm carrying what I can carry, but I'm alongside other people that are carrying those things. And so, for instance, I don't see what I do as a death doula as something super special that only I can do. It really, part of it is about encouraging people to understand the capacities within themselves to do that, to do that very work. Same thing as a creative person, I've honed my creativity, but you can do that too. And so really, existing within that spirit and that spirit of humility and service. And that's kind of where I see them connected to what I'm doing with my art practice now, and see so many connections with what all of you have done. And I'm just really learning a lot from hearing all of you today. Thank you.
I wanted to come in and speak to what Sarah was saying, and I did miss a bit of it, but I think what I captured was what I understood the question of before I cut out was how do you support, or what is the position that you or white people need to hold to support this healing or reclaiming. And I think for me it's coming back to grief, is that what I grieve is the loss of language, the loss of creative practice, and feeling like that creative practice always has to be on show. What about if I just want to be creative in my life? What about if I just want to embroider when I please, just as my ancestors did? And I think that the arts sector can fall into the practice of hyper-institutionalizing itself. And I ask the art sector to step away from that and to support creative practice away from this continuous performance. Really, what does it mean for the art sector to encourage people to just be creative? And how can the art sector challenge those barriers in society that restrict our creativity? And I'm also talking about I've just seen Adriene say steady and slow solutions. Exactly. I feel like our deepest form of creativity come from steady and slowness. And that also is what mirrors in the spaces and dialogues that Zena talks about in holding the uncomfortability. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I think what I'm just trying to say is that I just want, people just want to be. People just want to be, and it's when we can be. Literally, when I'm with my bees is when I can be in it. If it wasn't for beekeeping and following this interest to just be with bees, I wouldn't have learnt the word for bee in my mother tongue. It's all of these little things that just allow us to I guess reclaim life in places where life has been lost. So I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Serayna. Human being. Yeah. We are human beings, not human doings. I think that whole concept of us having to be productive all the time when we can just like be and just listen to our heartbeats. What was you going to say? You just came off mic for a moment. No? Okay. Okay. Yes, no?
I thought we were doing closing statement. Are we closing now?
I think so, yeah.
Maybe
it's quarter past. It's quarter past. Coming up to quarter past, and I just want to, if any of our panelists or guests, I don't like to say panelists, would like to make any comment, or maybe Heather from Culture Declares, who invited us to be part of this. If you'd like to make a comment, please feel free to say something at this point.
Yeah, just I'm all for kind of like staying on a bit longer. I mean, I know probably you're hungry. Have you eaten? Have people?
No.
We're eating lots of reading, just digesting and sharing lots of it's been fantastic, Zena. I have to thank you and Serayna, AHHAAHHA, Abdul, Adriene, for such a really extraordinary evening, and for everybody who shared the conversation. I feel, I just think continuity, furthering, deepening, taking this, to places where we can touch hearts and minds and power. Yeah. Because we have to, we've got to crack this open. We have to start opening this up. There's a very deep psychic chord here. I'm not going to go into this in any great depth, but just sort of research that I have been doing on and off for a long while is just sort of going right back to the whole beginning of writing, which within the canon of literature goes back to Sumerians. And actually what is completely revealing is that Gilgamesh, who's celebrated in cuneiform, at the British Museum, he was trying to hold his immortality. He did not want to die. He did not wish to die, but what he did was he actually cut down the sacred forest of the gods and the goddesses. He cut down the sacred forest of the cedar trees. And I feel there is a very deep trauma that has never really been fully acknowledged. And we almost have to go back deep in time. We're all time travelers. We are. We may as well admit it. We know we are in a way, but we have to go right back in time, and we have psychology, we have philosophy, we have history, we have archaeology. It's there, but we have to look, we have to really look. And so many different cultures and faiths and spiritualities carry trees at the center. It's there at the center. And so actually, I kind of feel that our stories are about reconnecting again through the tree to really find, our deeper root, our deeper root. We have to really understand where these traumas have occurred and keep occurring in deforestation.
Thank you. Thank you. Abdul, I see you've come back on camera. Did you have something you wanted to share?
It was just to say that it was such a beautiful, diverse conversation on many levels, a psychic level, an academic level, a personal, anecdotal level, and we all are bringing different valuable experiences to the table. So it's just beautiful to have this conversation. It feels like it doesn't happen enough. Do you know what I mean? And so just grateful really that being able to be part of this and listening and learning and enjoying the different collisions and the different aspects that, this conversation is bringing forward. That was it really. And thank you.
Thank you for your dulcet tones as well, and for putting that song together. I know that was short notice as well for you in a short space of time. And under some other pressures as well. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Was you going to say something? And then Ian, and then I guess I'll stop talking and we can draw this session to a close.
I was just saying thank you to Abdul for the music, but as a maybe final last statement, like also kind of in response to the question from I can't really see whose name it was, I can't, but I find as much as astrology is like is seen as like a is degraded by a lot of people, I think it's a very useful lens to see the world through, and I think it speaks to like in relation like the self and ego and all that stuff, like the Aquarius Leo polarity, which both ends that's one polarity and they both need each other. Aquarius rules the group, Leo rules the self and the heart. You need the self as much as you need the group, you need the group as much as you need the self. Similarly, with in relation to slow and steadiness, Taurus is a fixed earth sign which rules like Earth. It's a slow moving sign, it's slow and steady. The other side of that polarity is Scorpio, which rules transformation. You can't have both those things, you need with each other. That's all I have to say.
Thank you so much for that. And we actually have a fantastic astrologer online right about now, Optics Hamilton. Thank you for joining the conversation. Yeah, thank you for coming in. If you need an astrology reading, I would definitely recommend Optics Hamilton. Ian, do you have any final words?
Yeah, I just want to just say two things. And as much as we're having these conversations, it's like energy that we captivate. It's what do we then do with this energy? So one of the things that we talked about is what happens after we have these conversations. Someone, forgive me, was talking about what can you do as a white practitioner? Well, sometimes actually it's not the doing. Actually, it's a stepping back and actually maybe supporting other organizations and individuals that maybe do not have as Serayna was talking about, just being, actually creating spaces where people can just be, and that would be a really good form of allyship as well. So just kind of just putting that as a way, you don't always need to recreate the new, supporting the old and the people that are kind of have less opportunities is a really important part of this work and dialogue as well, bringing people together as well.
Again, I have to reiterate that I want to be I want accomplices. I want accomplices who's going to help be part of tearing down the illegalities of the system that we're living under now. And most of the stuff they're doing is illegal. So I want accomplices. Allyship is cool.
I'm up.
But I want an accomplice. I want accomplices. Okay, so yeah, I think this is going to be the last for me. I just want to thank everybody. I'm extremely humbled by the fact that everybody stuck around till way past the time of that we were supposed to finish. I want to thank Adriene as well for coming in from all the way across the other side of the world. I want to thank Ian for, I know you had a very busy schedule and you fitted the time in to do this. You came in after a busy schedule and just thank you to everybody. And I really hope that you will stick around and see what else in terms of stay in touch is what I mean to say. Stay in touch, look up the artist. All our social media is in the chat, so you might want to save the chat because there's also some very interesting comments in the chat as well that you might want to reflect over. But do watch this space because we want to have more of these conversations. We're hoping to turn it into something that could be a podcast. We want to have a platform for these conversations to happen often. And I think they can be very interesting spaces for people who are white, just flatly, to come and take an approach that's not just, like I said, an unbiased and unconscious extractivism, but you're actually coming to learn to give back, to open up, if you are gatekeepers and recognize yourself as gatekeepers, to actually put your foot in the door and hold the gate open, allow there to be access to funds, access to resources that aren't just about money. Also, we need space, we need platforming in ways where people can see us, where we're made visible for the work that we do. And this isn't about begging. This is about saying it's essential because you're missing out on half of the story. You're missing out on the bulk of the story. Actually, that's why I talked in the actual strapline for this is casting the truth. Who are the cast? And what is the truth? You have to have the whole story. You can't have the whole story if you're missing out or erasing or invisibilizing, you know, 2/3 of the planet. You can't. Won't work. We're all going to die if that happens. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Zena. Thank you so much.
I want to just thank Zena as well. I just to round it off to close. Just this has been an incredible evening of prophetic imagination and prophetic witness. And that word cast, forecast, casting forward. And I think to thank Heather as well, who brought the support for this as well. So everybody can save the chat, as Zena said, and I think the intention is to take this forward and further, isn't it? So if everybody signs up to Culture Declares, or actually makes themselves available if they want to be connected.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Awesome.